So data can be two things, qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative data result from categorizing or describing attributes of a population, while quantitative data consists of numbers from counts or measurements. So think quality versus quantity. We saw these two words earlier when describing variables, and qualitative data was categorical, it was a categorical variable, and then quantitative was numerical. Determine whether each set of data would be considered qualitative or quantitative. The color of a car. So if you're recording people's car colors, that would be qualitative. A person's age. So we can measure a person's age. That would be quantitative. A person's political party affiliation. So whether you're Republican or a Democrat or an independent, that would be qualitative. The mileage on a car, so that's something that we can count or measure, so that's quantitative. A person's gender, so we can't measure a person's gender, so this has to be a quality or a category, qualitative data. And then the volume of a liquid, that would be quantitative. We can further break down quantitative data into discrete or continuous data. Discrete data result from counting whole numbers and that are considered discrete data. The values will always be whole numbers, but can theoretically go on forever. So we get discrete data when we count whole things like people, right? Or the number of eggs a hen lays, or the number of cars parked in a parking lot. Whereas continuous data is data that result from measuring, and these values can take on an infinite number of decimal values. So with the accurate technology, you can always measure continuous data more accurately and more precisely with these decimal numbers. So we don't say, your weight is 150 pounds. We can actually get it to be much more accurate than that, right? With the scale, we can say, oh, it's really 150.3 pounds. And then if we had an even better scale, we could say, oh, it's really 150.32 pounds. So we can continue adding these accurate decimal values. Examples of data that is continuous would be, like we said, weights or distances, how far you travel, and time. So determine whether each sample of data is qualitative or quantitative. So if it's quantitative, let's further classify it as discrete or continuous. So the number of followers you have on Instagram, that would be quantitative. And it's discrete because you're not going to have a decimal number of followers. You're going to have, 100 followers or 125 followers. You're not going to have 125.7 followers. Political party preference, we already mentioned that one, is qualitative. The distance from your home to school is quantitative, and it can be measured really, perfectly. It can be very accurate, so we consider that continuous. Tuition. So this is definitely a number, the amount of money you pay to go to school, right? So we're going to say it's quantitative, but I would argue that it's actually discrete. So even though tuition is money and it is a decimal value, that decimal ends after 2 places in the 100th position. So technically we can count exactly how much money you're going to give to the school. And it technically ends, right? That decimal doesn't go on past the penny position. So I argue that it's discrete. But you could say it's continuous just because it's a decimal, I suppose. Weights of newborn babies are definitely quantitative and weight is continuous. Movie ratings. So maybe that's, like G, PG, PG-13, rated R, etc. I would say that's qualitative. But if we were talking about movie ratings, like, you give it 4 out of 5 stars. If you can have half stars or fractions of stars, it would be continuous, But if it was just whole stars, we would be talking about discrete quantitative. But I think here what I'm intending with movie ratings is like G, PG, PG-13, rated R, etc. The number of classes you're registered for. So this is going to be quantitative, and it's going to be discrete because you're not going to be registered for half a class or half a unit. Amount of milk a cow can produce, quantitative and continuous. It's, that liquid we can measure. And eye color is going to be qualitative.